Don't worry. Sweetheart, Ryan Vale said loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear. His champagne glass tilted lazily between two fingers. Nobody was looking at her anyway. A few people near the marble bar laughed before they even knew why. Because rich people in rooms like the Blackthorn Grand always laughed first and thought later. Evelyn Carter stood frozen in the middle of the charity gala with cold champagne dripping from her black server's uniform, the silver tray trembling in her hands, and her stepsister Brielle pressed one manicured hand to her mouth, as if she had just witnessed a tragedy instead of causing one. The spilled drinks had splashed across Evie's chest and stomach, turning the fabric glossy and tight, and she felt every eye lower. Judge. Dismiss. Ryan smiled at her, the way a man smiled at an old mistake. She's the fat girl no man wanted. Trust me. She's used to being invisible. For 3 seconds, Evie heard nothing but the chandelier crystals chiming softly above her, tiny pieces of glass singing, while something inside her went silent. She had spent the entire evening moving between men in tailored tuxedos and women glittering in diamonds, balancing trays, lowering her eyes. Pretending not to notice, Brielle wrapped around Ryan's arm like a prize he had won. Ryan had broken up with her 6 months ago by text, and tonight was the first time she had seen him since. He had not looked ashamed. He had looked relieved, as if trading Evie for her thinner, prettier stepsister was a promotion everyone should applaud. Brielle leaned closer, her perfume sweet enough to choke on, and whispered, "You should go clean yourself up before someone mistakes you for part of the buffet." More laughter rose around them, light and cruel, and Evie's fingers tightened around the tray until the rim cut into her palm. She bent down to gather the broken champagne flute before anyone could accuse her of making a bigger scene. Her knees touched the polished floor, and the room seemed to enjoy that more than the insult itself. Phones lifted. Someone muttered, "Poor thing." Someone else said, "That's Marissa Carter's stepdaughter." "Isn't it? The big one." Evie swallowed hard and reached for a shard of glass near Brielle's silver heels. That was when the chain around her neck snapped. The old black rose pendant slipped from beneath her collar, bounced once against the marble, and opened with a thin metallic click. Evie grabbed for it too late. The tiny inner face flashed under the ballroom lights, revealing a symbol she had never understood, a dagger wrapped in ivy beneath a half-moon. Across the room, in the private balcony above the orchestra, Dante Moretti stopped speaking mid-sentence. Dante had not come to the Blackthorn Gala for charity. He had come because 3 shipping contracts, 2 corrupt aldermen, and 1 traitor were supposed to move through the room before midnight. He had been watching everyone with the bored patience of a man who had learned long ago that fear made people honest faster than loyalty did. Then the server fell to her knees, and her pendant opened. The symbol struck him harder than a gunshot. He had seen it only once before. Burned into the inside cover of a ledger, pulled from his mother's study the night she died. His hand closed around the railing. Beside him, his Uncle Vincent noticed the shift and followed his gaze down to Evie. "Problem?" Vincent asked quietly. Dante did not answer. Below them, Brielle suddenly gasped and clutched her bare wrist. "My bracelet," she cried. "My diamond bracelet is gone." The accusation moved faster than truth ever could. Brielle's voice broke beautifully, perfectly, as if she had rehearsed heartbreak in a mirror. "It was right here, Daddy bought it for my birthday. She bumped into me earlier. She must have taken it. Evie rose slowly. The pendant clenched in her wet fist. I didn't touch your bracelet, she said. But her voice sounded too small in a room built to swallow women like her. Ryan stepped forward, his expression tightening into false disappointment. Evie, don't make this worse. Just give it back. That hurt more than the laughter. Worse? She had told Ryan things. She had never told anyone how her stepmother locked food cabinets when she was 14. How Brielle edited her photos to make her look bigger online. How every family dinner became a trial where her body was the crime. Now he looked at her like those secrets were evidence against her. Security came quickly. 2 men in black suits, moving through the guests as if Evie were dangerous. One of them reached for her arm. Before he touched her, a voice cut through the ballroom. Calm enough to be terrifying. Take your hand away from her. The room changed before Evie even turned. Laughter died. Shoulders straightened. Men who had been smirking suddenly became very interested in their drinks. Dante Moretti descended the staircase with no hurry at all, one hand in his pocket. His dark suit fitting him like a warning. Evie knew his name, the way everyone in Chicago knew it, whispered. Never shouted. Moretti meant docs. Union. Judges. Disappearances. Expensive funerals. And favors people regretted asking for. He stopped beside her. His eyes not on her ruined uniform. Not on her body. Not on the gossip vibrating around them. But on the pendant hidden in her fist. Nobody touches her, he said, until I know what she is. The words should have felt like rescue, but they landed like another sentence. Evie looked up at him, anger rising through her humiliation. I'm not a what, she said, surprising herself. I'm a person. A faint shift passed across Dante's face. Not quitte amusement. Not quite respect. Brielle let out a shaky laugh. Mr. Moretti, I'm so sorry you're being dragged into this. Evelyn has always had issues. She gets jealous. She lies when she's embarrassed. Ryan nodded quickly. Too quickly. She was obsessed with my life after we broke up. I wouldn't be shocked if this was some attempt to get attention. Evie stared at him, waiting for pain to crush her. But something colder came instead. She opened her fist just enough to check the pendant was still there. Dante saw the symbol again, and his jaw tightened. Search the room, he ordered, and search him first. Ryan's face drained. Excuse me. Dante did not look at him. One of Dante's men appeared from nowhere and took Ryan gently by the elbow, which somehow looked more threatening than force. Within moments, the diamond bracelet was found inside the inner pocket of Ryan's tuxedo jacket. Wrapped in a blackthorn cocktail napkin, Brielle made a sound so small and wounded that several people still turned toward her with sympathy. Ryan, she whispered, as if betrayed. Ryan stammered. I don't know how that got there. Evie stared at the bracelet, then at Brielle, and saw the answer before anyone said it. Brielle had not expected Ryan to be searched. She had expected Evie to be dragged out, crying, fired, humiliated, finished. But Dante did not expose Brielle. Not yet. He only turned to Evie and said, Come with me. Evie stepped back. I have a shift. Dante's gaze swept over her champagne-soaked uniform. Not anymore. He led her through a side corridor behind the ballroom, away from the music, away from the phones, away from the people who had laughed, while she knelt on broken glass. Evie followed because two of his men followed her, and because the pendant in her hand suddenly felt heavier than it had in 20 years. The office they entered belonged to the hotel owner, but Dante moved inside, as if every locked room in Chicago had been built for him. He closed the door, and the noise of the gala vanished. For the first time that night, Evie heard her own breathing. Dante stood across from her, close enough that she could see a thin scar near his collar, and the controlled violence in his stillness. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked. Evie lifted her chin. "My mother left it to me." "Your mother's name?" "I don't know. She died when I was little." His eyes sharpened. "People don't die and leave symbols like that by accident." Evie hated that her hands shook. She hated that she was wet, humiliated, and alone in a room with the most dangerous man in Chicago, still trying not to sound afraid. "I don't know what it means," she said. "I've never known. My stepmother told me. My mother was a broke woman who got herself killed running from debts." Dante's expression changed at the word killed, almost invisibly, but Evie saw it. He reached into his jacket and placed an old photograph on the desk between them. It was creased, faded, and carefully preserved. In it, a younger woman with dark hair stood beside a man Evie had never seen before. Around the woman's neck hung the same black rose pendant. Evie's chest tightened so hard, she nearly stepped back. "Who is she?" she whispered. Dante watched her, like the answer might destroy them both. "That," he said quietly, "is the woman who died the same night my mother was murdered." Before Evie could speak, the office door opened without a knock. Vincent Moretti entered with a soft smile and silver hair combed neatly back. Every inch, the elegant uncle from a family portrait. His gaze moved from Dante to Evie to the pendant on the desk. And for one brief second, the warmth left his face. It vanished so quickly. Evie wondered if she had imagined it. "Don't you?" Vincent said. "The guests are asking questions. The girl should be handled discreetly." Evie stiffened at the word, handled. Dante picked up the pendant and closed it before Vincent could step closer. "She stays with me tonight." Vincent's smile returned. Thinner this time. "Is that wise?" Dante looked at Evie then, and there was no tenderness in his eyes yet. Only suspicion, danger, and something that looked painfully close to fear. "Probably not," he said. "But everyone who wants her gone suddenly has a reason, and I want to know why." Evie should have run. Every sensible part of her knew that she had spent her whole life being unwanted in ordinary rooms. Now she had become wanted by men whose names made police reports disappear. But when Dante opened the office door and the sound of the ballroom rushed back in, she saw Brielle across the hall, crying prettily into Ryan's chest, while guests comforted her as if she were the wounded one. Evie saw her stepmother Marissa arrive, saw the disgust on her face before she even asked what happened, saw every familiar person choose the beautiful lie because it was easier to look at. Something inside Evie finally stopped, begging to be believed. She took the pendant from Dante's hand and fastened the broken chain around her wrist instead of her neck. "Fine," she said. "I'll come with you. But if you think I'm going to kneel again, Mr. Moretti, you picked the wrong fat girl." Dante's mouth curved slightly, and behind them, Vincent's smile disappeared. The first thing Evie learned about Dante Moretti's world was that silence had locks on it. The black SUV waiting behind the Blackthorn Grand did not idle at the curb like a normal car. It sat beneath the service awning with tinted windows. Engine low. Two men standing beside it as if the alley itself belonged to them. Evie slid into the back seat, with champagne drying cold against her skin and her broken pendant wrapped around her wrist. Dante sat beside her, not touching her, not speaking. His attention fixed on the rearview mirror, where the hotel lights shrank behind them. She wanted to ask where he was taking her, but pride kept her teeth together. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, again and again. By the seventh vibration, she looked down. The video was already online. Her kneeling, Ryan laughing, Brielle gasping. The caption read, "Plus-size waitress tries to steal diamond bracelet at elite gala." Evie turned the screen off before Dante could see her face crumble. By midnight, the internet had given her 1,000 names, worse than the one Ryan used. Gold digger, desperate whale, Mafia groupie, fat thief. The words blurred together as Dante's driver crossed the river toward the older part of Chicago, where warehouses crouched beside the water and the skyline looked like teeth against the night. Evie's phone rang. Marissa Carter. Against her better judgment. Evie answered. Her stepmother did not ask if she was safe. She did not ask if the accusation was true. She said, "Do not come back here tonight. Reporters are already calling the house." Evie closed her eyes. "Marissa, I didn't steal anything." "Then why is your face everywhere?" Marissa snapped. "Do you understand what you've done to Brielle's reputation? She finally got invited into the right circle. And you dragged your embarrassment into it?" Evie heard a door slam in the background. Then Marissa added, "Cola, your things will be on the porch. Take them before morning, or I'll throw them out." Dante's jaw moved once, but he said nothing. That somehow made Evie angrier than if he had mocked her. "Enjoying the show?" she asked, still gripping the dead phone. People usually pretend not to listen when someone's family throws them away. Dante looked at her then. The city lights cut across his face in passing bands, hardening him, softening him, hardening him again. "Family does not throw you away," he said. "People who are waiting for an excuse do." The sentence struck too close to comfort. Evie turned toward the window. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Dante said. "It is supposed to make you stop expecting mercy from people who profit from your pain." She almost laughed, because advice sounded different coming from a man rumored to own half the city's sins. But beneath the coldness, there was something practiced in his voice, as if he had learned the lesson with blood instead of words. The safe house was not a house. It was the top floor of a converted brick building overlooking the river. All stale doors, narrow windows, and furniture so expensive it looked unused. A woman named Rosa brought Evie dry clothes without asking questions. Black sweatpants, an oversized sweater, thick socks, and a towel, warm from the dryer. Evie changed in the bathroom and caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed. Her mascara had smudged beneath one eye, and the red mark from the broken chain still circled her neck. She touched it lightly, then forced herself to look lower. At the body, everyone had treated like an apology she owed the world. "No," she whispered to her reflection, though she wasn't sure what she was refusing yet. When she came out, Dante was standing at the kitchen island, with her pendant placed on a black velvet cloth beneath a magnifying lamp. Beside it lay her driver's license, employee badge, and phone. Evie stopped cold. "You searched me. I had Rosa empty your pockets while you changed," Dante said. "If Bellini sent you, you might be carrying more than a necklace." The name meant nothing to Evie, but the suspicion did. It landed between them like a slap. "You think I planned that?" Her voice sharpened. "You think I let my ex-boyfriend humiliate me? Let my stepsister frame me? Let strangers record me on my knees? Just so I could get into your car?" Dante's eyes did not move from the pendant. "I think desperate people do convincing things when powerful men pay them." Evie stepped closer, anger burning the shame out of her chest. "Then you don't know desperate women at all. Desperate women don't dream of mafia bosses. They dream of rent paid on time, one quiet morning, and a life where nobody laughs when they walk into a room for the first time." Dante looked as if she had hit something he had not guarded. He recovered quickly. Too quickly. "Your mother," he said. "What was her name?" Evie folded her arms. "I told you. I don't know. Your birth certificate lists Marissa Carter as your mother, because she changed it after my father died. She said my real mother was Trouble, and Trouble didn't deserve a grave." Dante's expression hardened at that, but not toward Evie. He opened a folder one of his men had brought in. Evelyn Carter. Father, Thomas Carter. Deceased. Stepmother, Marissa. Stepsister, Brielle. No criminal record. 2 hospital visits as a child. 1 for smoke inhalation at age 3. 1 for a broken wrist at 9. Evie's throat tightened. "Are you reading my life like a police report? I am reading the parts people tried to bury. And what part tells you I'm not lying?" Dante closed the folder. "None. That is the problem." Evie grabbed her pendant from the velvet cloth, but Dante caught her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was firm, not painful, and still, her body went still from the shock of being stopped. His eyes dropped to the small pale scar crossing the inside of her wrist. Something in him changed. Not softened exactly. More like a door opening in a room he had sealed for years. "Where did you get that scar?" he asked. Evie yanked free. "I don't know. I was 3. Dante stared at the mark, as if it had answered a question he was afraid to ask. Before he could speak again, the elevator chimed. One of his guards entered. "Face Grim. Bonin Hunt. Boss. The hotel fired her. Statement went out 5 minutes ago. They say she violated guest privacy and attempted theft." Evie laughed once. Empty and sharp. "Of course they did." The rich girl cried. "So the fat waitress must have done something wrong." The next blow came before dawn. Evie's phone. I returned to her only after Dante's technician copied it. Filled with messages from former co-workers. Some were cruel. Some were worse, because they were kind in a cowardly way. "I hope you're okay, but maybe stay away for a while. Brielle says she won't press charges if you apologize. Girl. Why would you go after someone like Dante Moretti? Evie sat at the kitchen island while the sky turned gray over the river, reading proof that truth meant nothing without power behind it. Dante watched from across the room. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked less like a king there, and more like a man who had not slept properly in years. "Bellini's people are pushing the story," he said. "The theft was only the first layer. Now, they are making you look obsessed with me." Evie looked up slowly. "Why would they care about me?" Dante touched the edge of the pendant. "That is what I intend to find out." Across the city, Brielle Carter sat in Luca Bellini's private lounge, with a glass of untouched wine and a smile she could no longer keep steady. Luca was younger than Dante, but lacked none of the danger. His charm was brighter, his cruelty less disciplined. He turned Brielle's phone toward her, enlarging a photo of Evie's opened pendant. "You said she was nobody," he said softly. Brielle lifted her chin. "She is nobody. She's a waitress. My stepfather's mistake." Luca's smile thinned. "Nobody does not wear a Greco mark." Brielle blinked. What?" He leaned back. "Studying her. Your sister may be worth more than you understand." The word sister made Brielle's mouth tighten. "She is not my sister." Luca laughed quietly. "Good. Then taking from her should not trouble you." He slid a small velvet pouch across the table. Inside was a duplicate black rose pendant, almost identical to Evie's. "Switch them. Bring me the real one. If Dante Moretti keeps her close, make him believe she betrayed him." Back at the safe house, Dante ordered Evie not to leave. He said it like a command, not a request. And that was the final crack in her patience. "You don't own me." "No," he said. "But everyone hunting that necklace thinks I do. And for tonight, that may keep you alive. You still think I'm part of this. I think you are either bait, K, or victim. I do not know which, yet." Evie stepped close enough to see the faint exhaustion beneath his controlled face. "Then listen carefully. Mr. Moretti, I have spent my whole life being judged by people who never asked one honest question. My body was evidence. My silence was guilt. My anger was proof I was unstable. I will not survive one cage, just to be locked in a prettier one by you." Dante's eyes held hers for a long second. Then he said quietly, "If this were a cage, Evain, you would not be speaking to me like that." The lights went out before she could answer. Every window turned black at once. Somewhere below, metal groaned. Dante moved faster than thought, catching Evie by the waist and pulling her behind the kitchen island as glass exploded inward from the living room. She hit the floor with his body shielding hers. The smell of gunpowder and river air rushing through the shattered windows. Men shouted in Italian. Rosa screamed once, then went silent. Evie clutched the pendant at her wrist so hard, the metal bit into her palm. Dante drew a gun from beneath the counter. His face terrifyingly calm. Now the danger had given him something simple to understand. On the far wall, revealed by the flash of emergency lights, red paint dripped in fresh letters across the white plaster. "Give, U.S., the fat girl. Or Chicago burns." Evie stared at the words until they blurred. Dante looked at them too. And for the first time since she met him, his control slipped. "Marco," he said, voice low and lethal. "Find who touched my house." Marco appeared from the dark hallway like a shadow given orders. He was broad, Sile, with a scar cutting through one eyebrow and eyes that moved first to Evie's wrist. While Dante's men secured the shattered room, Marco crouched beside her and pressed something into her hand. It was a photograph. folded twice and soft with age. Evie opened it with shaking fingers. 3 people stood outside a church, a dark-haired woman wearing Evie's pendant, a stern older man with kind eyes, and a little girl with round cheeks holding a stuffed rabbit. On the back, written in faded ink, were 2 words, Elena's child. Evie's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Marco glanced toward Dante, then back at her. His voice, when it came, was rough from disuse. "Your mother didn't abandon you," he said. "She was running." Across the room, Dante turned just in time to hear him, and the past they had all been buried under began to move. Dante stared at Marco, as if the man had spoken a language forbidden in his house. For years, Marco had been useful because he was silent. He heard everything, judged nothing, and carried out orders without turning memories into weakness. Now he stood in the wreckage of the safe house, glass glittering across the floor like ice, and had just handed Evie a photograph that changed the shape of every lie she had ever been told. Evie held it with both hands. The little girl in the picture had her eyes, her cheeks, even the same stubborn crease between her brows. Elena's child. She read again, barely above a whisper. The name opened something in her chest that hurt worse than insult or fear. Not Mom. Not the woman who left. Not the trouble Marissa had described with contempt. Elena. A real name. A person. Dante stepped closer, his voice low. "Marco. Explain." Marco looked at Evie before he looked at Dante, and that alone made Dante's jaw tighten. "Salvatore Greco gave me that photo the night before he died," Marco said. Each word came rough, as if dragged through old smoke. "He told me if anyone ever found the girl, I was to make sure she learned. Her mother ran to protect her, not to abandon her." Evie's fingers closed around the photograph until the edges bent. "You knew?" she asked. "All this time, someone knew I existed." Marco's face changed with something close to shame. "I was 19. By the time I found the foster file, Marissa Carter had already taken you in under another name. Salvatore was dead. Elena was dead. Mrs. Moretti was dead. Vincent said digging would get you killed." Dante went still at his uncle's name. "Vincent told you to stop looking." Marco nodded once. The ruined apartment seemed to grow colder around them. Dante ordered everyone out except Marco and Evie. But even alone, trust did not enter the room easily. "South side," Marco said. "St. Agnes Church. If any record survived, it's there." Dante immediately said no. Evie immediately said she was going. They faced each other across the broken glass, neither willing to be the first to blink. "Someone just shot through my windows to reach you," Dante said. "That is exactly why I need answers." Evie replied, "I'm tired of men deciding that keeping me ignorant is protection." The sentence landed harder because it was true. Dante looked toward the red message on the wall, then at the pendant wrapped around her wrist, then at the scar he had stared at earlier, like it belonged to a ghost. "You leave this building without me," he said, "and Bellini's people will take you before you reach the street." Evie lifted her chin. "Then, come with me. But don't mistake that for permission to control me." "Saint Agnes Church sat between a boarded laundromat and a grocery store with iron bars across its windows. Its brick walls darkened by decades of exhaust and winter. Evie had expected holy light. Candles. Something soft enough to hold the answers she needed. Instead, the church smelled of old wood, floor polish, and rain trapped in stone. A nun with cloud-white hair waited near the front pew, her hands folded over a rosary. Sister Agnes did not ask who Evie was. She looked at the black rose pendant and began to cry. That frightened Evie more than the gunfire had. "You have Elena's eyes," the old woman said. Evie swallowed. "Everyone keeps saying her name, like I should know how to survive, hearing it." Sister Agnes reached for her hand but stopped short. Asking silently, Evie let her take it. The nun's fingers were warm and fragile. "Your mother did not leave you. Child, she carried you here with blood on her dress and smoke in your hair." The story came in pieces, because Sister Agnes had to stop twice to breathe through the grief. Elena Greco had arrived one winter night, 24 years earlier, half-conscious, carrying a little girl wrapped in a man's coat. She said her father Salvatore had uncovered a betrayal inside the Moretti family. She said Dante's mother, Lucia. I had tried to help them escape after realizing the same traitor had sold information to the Bellinis. But the car meant to take them out of Chicago never came. The safe house burned. Lucia Moretti was murdered. Salvatore disappeared and was later found in the river. Elena, already wounded, made it as far as St. Agnes before collapsing at the altar. She made me promise, Sister Agnes whispered, that the child would grow up outside the families. She said the ledger would wake when the rose opened under Moretti blood. Dante's face lost color. Moretti blood. Evie turned to him. "What does that mean?" Dante did not answer quickly, and that silence told Evie he knew more than he wanted to. Sister Agnes reached beneath the altar cloth and removed a small tin box, the kind used for old communion wafers. Inside was a hospital bracelet, a burned strip of baby blanket, and a folded document sealed in wax. The name typed across the top made Evie's lungs stop working. Evelina Rose Greco. Mother, Elena Greco. Father unknown. Guardian of record, Salvatore Greco. Evie pressed a hand over her mouth, but the sound escaped anyway. Small and wounded. The cry of someone meeting herself too late. Dante looked at the document as if it were a weapon pointed at him. Greco kept the financial architecture of our family. He said, every debt, every payoff, every betrayal. If she is his heir, Sister Agnes finished softly, then whatever he hid was meant for her. Before Evie could absorb that, her phone began vibrating with a flood of alerts. She had forgotten it was even in her coat pocket. Dante reached for it, but Evie stepped back and looked herself. The screen showed a video posted from an anonymous account, Brielle in a parking garage, stumbling backward, crying out as Evie appeared to shove her. The angle was grainy, the cut too sharp, but the caption had already done its work. Disgraced waitress attacks, stepsister after Mafia scandal. Another clip followed, this one of Ryan, standing outside the Blackthorn Grand, face pale but sincere for the cameras. Evelyn has been unstable for a long time, he said. Brielle tried to protect her. We all did. Evie watched the lie spread in real time. Sister Agnes crossed herself. Dante's expression hardened into something lethal. Bellini is forcing you into the open, he said. Evie shook her head. No, betrayals. They returned through the side door of the church. But the alley was no longer empty. 2 black cars blocked one end, a delivery van the other. Dante pushed Evie behind him before the first man stepped out. Luca Bellini emerged, smiling. Coat open, despite the cold. As if violence were only another form of weather. Don't you? He called. You always did collect wounded things. Dante's hand moved inside his jacket. Walk away. Luca's smile widened when he saw Evie. Evelina Greco. Your grandfather made many powerful men nervous. Though you look exactly like what they said you were. Easy to overlook. Evie felt the old shame try to rise. But this time, rage stood in front of it. Funny, she said, voice shaking but clear. Everyone who overlooks me keeps showing up terrified of what I'm wearing around my wrist. Luca's eyes flicked to the pendant, and his smile disappeared. The first shot cracked against the church wall. Dante moved, like the violence had been waiting inside his bones. He pulled Evie down behind a stone planter as Marco fired from the doorway. Silent, no longer. His gun flashing in the dim alley. Sister Agnes had vanished back inside, locking the parish door behind them with a metal bar that dropped like judgment. Evie crouched beside Dante, heart slamming so hard she could barely hear him say, "When I tell you." Rune left. No, she said. His head snapped toward her. This is not the time for pride. It's not pride. She pulled the tin box from under her coat and shoved it into his hands. They want the pendant. They don't know about this. Get it out. Dante stared at her for half a second. And in that half second, she saw the worst thing possible, fear. Not for himself, but for her. Then Marco shouted, and the alley exploded again. They escaped through the church basement, down a coal chute that left Evie's palms scraped raw, and her sweater streaked black. Dante did not let go of her once. Even when she told him she could climb by herself. By the time they reached the second car, Marco had hidden 2 blocks away. Sirens wailed in the distance. Though Evie had no idea if they were real police or men paid to sound like them. Inside the car, Dante opened the folded document again, then turned the black rose pendant beneath the dome light. The inner plate carried a tiny groove, shaped like a crescent. He pressed his thumb against it, and nothing happened. Then he looked at Evie's scarred wrist. Sister Agnes said Moretti blood. He murmured. Evie's stomach tightened. No. Dante took a small blade from his pocket and cut the pad of his thumb before she could stop him. My mother died protecting this secret. Let's see why. When Dante pressed his blood to the rose, the pendant clicked once, then opened deeper than Evie had ever seen. A second compartment unfolded beneath the first, revealing a strip of microfilm curled around a metal pin and a tiny engraved code G ledger E R G. Dante's breath changed. Evie stared at the initials. Evelina Rose Greco. She whispered. The name no longer felt like a stranger's. It felt like a door with her hand already on the knob. Dante looked at her then, and the suspicion that had shadowed his eyes since the gala finally cracked. Not vanished, but cracked enough for something human to show through. You are not bait, he said quietly. You are the key. Evie looked down at the pendant that had hung against her skin through every insult, every lonely birthday. every locked pantry and cruel dinner. "No," she said, closing her fist around it. "I'm the person they failed to erase." Neither of them saw Vincent watching the security feed from Dante's private office across town, the church alley, the gunfight, the escape. Even the moment the pendant opened had all been captured by a camera Luca believed was his. Vincent sat in Dante's chair, one hand resting on a glass of untouched scotch. Betrayal stood near the window, pale and restless, clutching the duplicate pendant in her palm. "You promised she would be arrested by now," she said. Vincent did not look at her. On the screen, Dante leaned toward Evie, as if the rest of the world had narrowed to the space between them. That, more than the ledger, made Vincent's face harden. "The problem is no longer what she knows," he said. "The problem is what he feels." Betrayal swallowed. "What do we do?" Vincent finally turned, his smile thin and dead. "If Dante Moretti falls for that girl, then we kill them both." Dante did not tell Evie about the engagement until she saw Betrayal's face on every screen in his penthouse. The announcement ran beneath a photograph from the Blackthorn Gala, cropped so carefully that Evie's humiliation vanished, and Betrayal's beauty filled the frame. "Moretti family to restore trust through alliance with Carter heiress." The headline read, as if Betrayal were royalty, and Evie were a stain already scrubbed from the marble. Evie stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of Rosa's borrowed sweaters, while Dante watched her reaction with the stillness of a man bracing for a bullet. "It's a trap," he said before she could speak. "Vincent wants me isolated. Betrayal wants legitimacy. Bellini wants the ledger. If they think I'm giving them what they want, they'll move in public." Evie laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So you're going to stand beside the woman who framed me and call it strategy?" Dante's eyes darkened. "I am going to let them believe they have won long enough to expose who gives the orders." Evie wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. She had believed people before, when they looked sincere. And every time, sincerity had been a prettier doorway into betrayal. "Did you plan to tell me before or after the city decided I was too pathetic to keep?" she asked. He stepped closer, but she stepped back first. The small movement hit him harder than anger. "Evelyn." "No," she said. The name Evelina, still too new and too painful to wear in a fight. "You don't get to say my name like that after making my humiliation part of your chessboard." Dante's jaw tightened. "If I move openly, Vincent disappears. If I refuse, Bellini strikes again. If I keep you beside me, they kill you to prove I can bleed." Evie looked at him, eyes bright but unbroken. "And if you choose for me, you become another man who thinks my life is safer in his hands than mine." That night, Evie left the penthouse with a fake pendant on the dresser and the real black rose taped beneath her sleeve. She did not sneak out because she was foolish. She sneaked out because Marco had taught her the blind spot near the freight elevator with only 3 words. Camera turned slow. He waited in the alley beside an old gray sedan, his face unreadable beneath the street lamp. "He will rage," Marco said. Evie slid into the passenger seat. "Let him. I'm not his prisoner. And I'm not his weakness to hide." Marco started the car. Weakness is not always insult. Evie looked out at the wet streets, where Chicago blurred into gold and black, It is when everyone uses it to decide what you're allowed to survive. In her lap sat Sister Agnes's tin box. The microfilm sealed inside a lipstick case Rosa had given her, and a church key, older than both of them. If the truth had survived anywhere, it would be below St. Agnes, where secrets were buried with the dead, and sometimes waited for the living to grow brave enough. The church basement smelled of dust, candle wax, and old flooding. Sister Agnes met them with a flashlight and a ring of keys that shook in her hand. Your grandfather was a cautious man, she told Evie, leading them past shelves of baptism records and cracked statues wrapped in sheets. He trusted paper more than people, and God more than both. Behind a locked cabinet marked choir robes, there was a narrow door Evie never would have noticed. Marco forced it open with one shoulder. Inside, stacked in metal boxes, were records Salvatore Greco had hidden under the church's name, bank transfers, photographs, shipping receipts, and a sealed envelope addressed to E.R.G. When she stops running, Evie's hand trembled as she opened it. The letter was short. Salvatore's words did not comfort her. They armed her. He wrote that the Black Rose held only the map, not the treasure. The real ledger was divided into 4 pieces: blood, witness, money, and memory. All 4 had to meet in public, or Vincent Moretti would bury them one by one. Memory was the worst piece. It came in the form of an old security tape, converted to a digital drive by a priest who had died 10 years earlier. Sister Agnes played it on a dusty monitor in the parish office. The image flickered, gray and broken, but the voices were clear enough to make Dante's entire past bleed through the screen. Lucia Moretti stood in a garage, holding a little girl, wrapped in a blanket. Elena Greco argued with Salvatore near an open car door. Then Vincent entered the frame. Younger, handsome, smiling like a man, arriving to save the day. He embraced Lucia. Seconds later, men with Bellini rings stepped from the dark behind him. Evie watched Dante's mother turn, understanding too late. The audio cracked. Then Vincent's voice cut through. Burn the house. The girl disappears. Dante grows up, owing me everything. Sister Agnes covered her mouth. Marco bowed his head. Evie did not cry. Something colder than tears settled in her bones. Dante found them before dawn, and the first thing he did was not shout. That frightened Evie more. He entered the parish office, soaked from the rain, eyes moving over Marco. Sister Agnes. The open files. Then Evie. You left me a fake pendant, he said. Evie lifted her chin. You announced a fake engagement. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sister Agnes, brave in the way. Only old women who had buried too much could be, turned the monitor toward him and pressed play. Dante watched his mother die without making a sound. Not once. His face emptied so completely that Evie wanted to reach for him despite everything. When Vincent's voice filled the room, Dante put one hand on the back of a chair, as if the floor had shifted beneath him. He raised me, he said quietly. No ray yet. Just a child's sentence in a grown man's mouth. Evie stepped closer, but did not touch him. Then make him answer as the man you became, not the boy he used. The engagement gala took place at the Moretti Foundation Hall, where marble columns rose like a courthouse built for kings. Every powerful person who had laughed at Evie, doubted her, I've fired her, posted about her, or comforted Brielle was there. Brielle wore white lace and diamonds, glowing beneath camera flashes as Ryan stood near the stage with legal documents ready for Dante's signature. Vincent moved through the room with paternal grace, touching shoulders, accepting congratulations, selling betrayal as family unity. Dante stood beside him in a black suit, beautiful and unreadable, while the crowd whispered about how merciful he was to choose Brielle after the scandal her unstable stepsister caused. Brielle leaned toward him and murmured, "After tonight, nobody will remember Evelyn." Dante looked at her. At last, "That," he said softly, "is exactly why tonight matters." Before Brielle could understand, the lights dimmed, and the giant screen behind the stage turned black. Evie walked in through the center doors alone. No ball gown, no borrowed diamonds, just a tailored black dress. Her hair pinned back, the black rose pendant resting openly at her throat. The room reacted the way it had the first night whispers. Phones, laughter, trying to be born. But this time, Evie did not lower her eyes. "Before anyone signs anything," she said, her voice carried by the hall's microphone system Marco had quietly taken over, "I'd like to return something Brielle Carter lost." On the screen, the Blackthorn security footage appeared. It showed Brielle removing her own bracelet, wrapping it in a napkin, and slipping it toward Evie's service station. Then it showed Ryan taking the napkin and panicking when Dante ordered him searched. Gasps moved through the hall. Brielle's face went white beneath her makeup. Evie turned to Ryan. "You told the city I was unstable. Tell them now how much Luca Bellini paid you to make me look guilty." Ryan tried to run, but Dante's men closed the exits before he reached the aisle. Evie clicked the remote again. Bank records filled the screen, transfers from shell companies tied to Luca, payments to Ryan, payments to Brielle's influencer manager, payments to the anonymous account that posted the edited parking garage video. Then came the raw garage footage, showing Brielle cutting her own arm with a compact mirror blade before throwing herself backward and screaming Evie's name. The crowd recoiled from her, as if beauty had spoiled in front of them. Brielle sobbed. "She's lying. She forged all of it." Vincent stepped forward. "Calm, but pâle. Enough. This is a circus." Evie looked at him then, and the hall seemed to hold its breath. "No, Mr. Moretti," she said. "This is memory." She touched the pendant, "And you should have killed the girl before she learned how to open the rose." The old recording began with static. Then Salvatore Greco's voice filled the hall. Weak, but unmistakable. Naming dates, accounts, and men who had sold blood for power. The final section played from the garage tape. Vincent's younger voice ordering the fire. Lucia's death. Eleanor's disappearance. And the erasure of a child named Evelina Rose Greco. Dante did not move until his mother's scream cut through the speakers. Then he turned to Vincent. Not as a nephew. Not as a boy. As the boss Vincent had accidentally created by trying to own him. Vincent backed away. But the council members surrounding the hall did not. Onebuwan. Men who had feared him for 20 years lowered their eyes from Dante and fixed them on Vincent. Evie stood beneath the screen, her hands steady now, her body no longer an apology, in the room that had tried to make her one. Dante looked at her across the crowd, and everyone finally understood the truth. His deadliest weakness was not that he loved her. It was that, for here, he would stop protecting the lie. Vincent Moretti did not beg at first. Men like him never begged while there were still witnesses they could manipulate. He straightened his jacket beneath the giant screen where his own voice had just condemned him, then smiled with the weary patience of a man surrounded by fools. A forged recording, he said, looking not at Dante, but at the council elders seated along the front row. A grieving waitress with a stolen name. A few edited files. And suddenly we are rewriting 24 years of history. For one brief second, Evie understood why he had survived so long. His calm was almost beautiful. It invited people to doubt what they had seen with their own eyes. But then Sister Agnes walked in through the side entrance, small and bent, and carrying Salvatore Greco's original ledger in both arms. Behind her came two retired detectives, a former Moretti doctor, and Marco, with a sealed evidence case. Vincent's smile finally lost its shape. The doctor spoke first. His name was Dr. Leonard Voss, and his hands shook as he placed old medical records on the table before the council. "I treated Elena Greco the night she died," he said. "Vincent paid me to falsify the death report and remove the child's name from every file." Evie stood very still as her mother was turned from rumor into record. The detectives confirmed the fire had been buried by paid officials. Marco opened the evidence case and removed the burned strip of baby blanket, the hospital bracelet, and a blood comparison report Dante had ordered that morning, using the samples from the pendant and the church records. Evelina Rose Greco was real. The child Vincent had ordered erased had grown into the woman standing before him. Brielle collapsed into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks as if tears could wash away ambition. Ryan shouted for a lawyer, forgetting he had become the kind of man no honest lawyer wanted beside them. Luca Bellini tried to leave Chicago before sunrise. But Dante had spent years learning the one truth. Men like Luca always forgot. Crime was not power, unless it could move. Bidam. Every Bellini shipment at the docks had been frozen. Every customs officer he owned had switched sides, or vanished. And every account tied to the Greco ledger had been flagged by men who owed Dante more fear than loyalty. Luca was caught at a private airfield with 3 passports, 2 suitcases of cash, and Brielle's messages still on his encrypted phone. Dante did not attend the arrest. He sent Marco, because Luca deserved no audience from the man he had failed to break. When Marco returned and told Evie it was done, she expected triumph to feel louder. Instead, it felt like standing after a long illness. Weak, but alive. She looked at the black rose pendant in her palm and whispered, "They killed my mother for this." Dante answered from across the room, "No, they killed her because she loved you more than she feared them." Vincent's punishment was not quick, because Evie refused to let it be simple. Dante wanted blood. The council wanted an example. The old men wanted Vincent dragged into a basement and turned into a warning. No one would speak above a whisper. Evie listened to all of them from the end of the long table, then stood. "No," she said. Every face turned to her. She could feel Dante's attention most of all, fierce and confused. "If you kill him tonight, he becomes a ghost story. Half the city will never know what he did. Men will still say he was betrayed by a woman with convenient tears and a necklace. I lived my whole life under other people's version of the truth. I won't let him hide inside another one." Vincent laughed softly. "You think courts can touch me?" Evie looked at the federal agents waiting beyond the doors. Men summoned not by mercy, but by every document Salvatore had saved. "No," she said. "I think evidence can." Betrayal came to Evie 3 days later, when the city had already begun devouring her. Sponsors dropped her. Friends stopped answering. The same women who had hugged her at the engagement gala now reposted clips of her framing Evie with captions about betrayal and fake innocence. She arrived at the old Carter house wearing sunglasses too large for her face, standing beside Marissa like a daughter, attending her own funeral. Evie had come only to collect the last box of her father's things. The few pieces Marissa had not sold or thrown away. "Please," Betrayal said before Evie could reach the porch. "Tell them I didn't know how serious it was. Tell them Luca manipulated me." Evie looked at her stepsister. Really looked. And saw not beauty, not victory, not the girl who had laughed while champagne soaked into her uniform, but a hollow person who had mistaken attention for love until it ate her alive. "You knew enough to enjoy it," Evie said. "That is what you have to live with." Marissa tried a different kind of performance. She cried without ruining her makeup. One hand pressed to her chest. "Evine, sweetheart, we were family. I raised you." The word raised almost made Evie smile. She remembered locked cabinets, birthday cakes. Betrayal blew out on her behalf. Dresses bought too small, so Marissa could sigh in fitting rooms and say, "Maybe this will motivate you." She remembered Ryan being invited to dinner after the breakup because Marissa liked Betrayal with him better. Evie reached into her purse and removed the house key she had carried for years, like proof she belonged somewhere. She placed it in Marissa's palm. "You taught me I had no home," she said quietly. "So I built one you can never enter." Marissa's tears stopped. That, more than screaming. I told Evie she had finally struck the truth. She picked up the box, walked down the steps, and did not look back when the door closed behind her. Dante waited beside the car, but he did not open the door for her until she reached it herself. He had learned that much. Since the gala, he had been careful with silence, careful with distance, careful not to turn protection into ownership, but carefulness did not erase what had happened between them. That evening, in his penthouse, he placed the full Greco ledger on the table between them, along with documents transferring legal control of Salvatore's assets to Evie. "Your grandfather built this," he said. "My family used it. Vincent killed for it. Bellini hunted it. It belongs to you." Evie touched the leather cover. "And if I take it, then you decide what survives." She looked up. Even if what I decide hurts you, Dante did not flinch. Especially then. The answer was the closest thing to an apology he could have bought with power. But Evie no longer accepted payment in beautiful words. "You didn't trust me," she said. "You held me like a secret, before you held me like a person." "I know," Dante said. The simplicity of it hurt more than denial would have. He stood on the other side of the table, hands empty. No gun, no command, no empire between them, except the one he was willing to lose. When I saw the pendant, I saw my mother's blood before I saw you. When the city laughed at you, I used your pain to draw out my enemy. I told myself it was strategy. It was cowardice, dressed as control. Evie's throat tightened, but she refused to soften too quickly. And now, Dante looked at her with the exhaustion of a man, finally too honest to be safe. Now, I am asking for nothing. Not forgiveness. Not love. Not even a place beside you. I am only giving back what should never have been taken. He slid a key across the table. Not to his home. Not to a vault. But to a small storefront near the river. Rosa said you once wanted a bakery. 6 months later, the sign above that storefront read, Black Rose House. Though most women who came through the back door simply called it safe. In the mornings, Evie baked cardamom buns, sour cherry pies, and honey cakes from recipes Sister Agnes claimed Elena once loved. In the afternoons, the upstairs rooms filled with women who needed legal help, temporary shelter, quiet coffee, or someone to believe them before they had perfect evidence. Some were running from husbands, some from families, some from men like Dante, though Evie never said that part aloud when he visited. He came after closing, always through the front door, always waiting until she unlocked it herself. Sometimes he brought security reports. Sometimes he brought flowers and left them on the counter without expectation. Sometimes they sat together in the kitchen while the city moved outside. And neither of them mentioned weakness, because they had both learned the word could mean wound or weapon, depending on who held it. The new Moretti Foundation Gala was held in the same hall where Vincent had fallen, because Evie insisted ghosts only owned rooms people abandoned. This time, her name stood at the top of the invitations. Evelina Rose, Greco, founder of Black Rose House. She wore deep green velvet, the pendant at her throat, her body neither hidden nor offered for judgment. When she entered, conversations dipped. People who had laughed at the Blackthorn lowered their eyes. The Blackthorn manager who fired her tried to apologize near the champagne table. Evie thanked him for the lesson and walked past before he could finish. Ryan, disgraced and awaiting trial, was absent. Brielle had sold interviews until even Pity got bored of her. Marissa sent flowers with no card. Evie donated them to the church altar, where Elena's name had finally been carved into stone. Near the end of the night, a young woman approached Evie with tears shining in her eyes and said, "I saw the video of what they did to you. I thought if you could stand up again, maybe I could too." Evie took her hands, careful and warm. Across the room, Dante watched without interrupting. Someone beside him, a businessman too foolish to recognize danger when it wore a tuxedo, murmured, "So that's her, the weakness." Dante turned his head slowly. Was? A sentence like that would have ended in fear. Now he only smiled, because Evie had taught him that not every insult deserved blood. Some deserved to die from being outgrown. "No," he said, his eyes on the woman who had walked through shame and come out carrying keys for others. "She was never my weakness, because she made me vulnerable. She was my weakness, because she was the only thing I couldn't afford to lose, and the only one strong enough to make me better."